Good afternoon, friends. I hope everyone is doing well. And the last video I recorded was too long, so I'm going to try it again and keep it a little shorter. Yay, short videos. So we're doing chapter 7, Bain, and I am going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to start with the last paragraph in the Bain. Had this quote that I really liked. Excellent teachers develop their abilities through constant self-evaluation, reflection, and the willingness to change. And the thing that scares me the most is the willingness to change, but I figured we all left our jobs to come to KU to become better thinkers, better researchers, better teachers, and better musicians, and better music educators. So if we're going to change that much, I'm sure that we can handle maybe the rest. We'll see. Bain talks a lot about assessments and what assessments should do and what teachers who do assessments or good teachers do assessments. They help students learn and they attempt to capture the thinking process. Students need to learn what they know and what they don't know. And they need to be able to define and tell you, or at least demonstrate their thinking process. And that can be through a summary of a class or a chapter or a bunch of different ways to help their teachers figure out how they think about things. What assessments shouldn't do is memorize how much do they know. Can they memorize facts? Can they do it quickly? Usually we'll use a song to do that. So we understand that that means lyrics and not necessarily facts. So one of one and the other. But to rank and judge students to say, well, this is my best student because they got this score on the ACT is not helpful. Learning-based versus performance-based assessments. Performance-based assessments are, can students regurgitate the facts? Can they tell you the dates or the words that are in bold in their textbooks? They are penalized for late work, misspelled words, maybe even incorrect formats. And I know that that's near and dear to us as researchers. The format has to be just so, and the punctuation has to be just so. And but at what point do we, do we determine good content versus, we can help get them to that place, but to dismiss a paper that has excellent content because it may not be structured in the right way is something we need to consider. Bain uses the example of the Sistine Chapel, and do we stand there and look at this and think, well, he missed his deadline in getting this done? No, we look at the work and we think about how beautiful it is and how much work must have gone into it and how hard it must have been to complete. So when we look at the whole, we don't see that he was late missing a deadline or that he didn't use the kind of paint that I wanted him to use or those sorts of things. We see the work. So going back to learning-based assessments is that these are cumulative, and we need to be using cumulative, just like cumulative assessment as we do learning. It's scaffolding. And so just testing this, then this, then this, and this is one way of doing things. But what if we test this and then we see what this means based on this, and they know this so they can do this, and then they know this and this so they can do this, and we are scaffolding the assessment, not just the learning. It causes students to change how they see things and think about things and process things and see how all of those things are connected is a wider scope or a wider view of looking at information rather than just point to point to point to point. And then grading is about communicating with students instead of you failed. It's an opportunity to give feedback, and feedback and criticism are two separate things. And we talked about that earlier this semester. And just for fun, I know that some of you have already looked at it, but you see my augmented A chord over there on the side. So this slide gets an A+. Good teachers. I love this. As an extrovert, this is the part about teaching online that I miss the most. I miss connecting with my students. I miss talking to them, calling them by name, asking how they're doing. You know, how was your recital? Did you find your accompanist? Did you were you able to, you know, those little bits of conversation that you get that connect you to people. And that's what I miss about teaching online. I love that I still see them via Zoom, so I can still kind of look at their faces and make sure that they're sleeping and they're doing okay. Um, but when we make those connections, we learn how they learn. We talk to them, we see how they process things, and I love talking to them before and after classes, and memorizing their names is important to me. And we know as music educators, especially in general music, we have to memorize the names of all the kids in all the classes in the whole school. So that's important to me because it's important to my students for me to call them by name instead of, hey, you kid with the blonde hair. Um, so it was really important for them to know their name because Dr. Mendez came in and talked to my class and talked about how growing up, everybody called him Gerardo instead of Henado, and how he didn't correct them, and how one day one of his professors called him by his name, and how that changed him. So just adding that into the whole mix of things, memorizing people's names is important to them. And so knowing their name and saying it correctly is a big deal. And then a lot of times finding out about them could be as simple as a survey. We always do introductions that say, tell us your name, one thing that you really, one song you really enjoy listening to every day, and if you could have one meal and you were stuck on a desert island, what would that meal be? Mine's always tacos because, you know, you can pick things off if you want to, but tacos. Um, and then good teachers help students to do intellectual work. And we are masters of practice. We practice instruments. We know how to sit in practice rooms for hours and hours and practice. And we know the method of getting a concept to, you know, mastery through practice. And so we have to teach our students how to do that. And basically, we teach ourselves out of a job. If we become practice mentors, we start to model how to think through things and how to get from point A to point B, and how to justify our thinking and how to speak to people appropriately. And so we model these things, but while we're modeling them, our students are practicing. So we should be teaching ourselves out of a job. Formative and summative assessments. This is something that I've been talking a lot about in my MEMT 341 and my MEMT 420 class. Summative really seems like it's that performance-based assessment. And while formative seems very relaxed and loosey-goosey, I would much rather have a student, you know, write a poem or a song or something about what it is that they're learning, rather than them just sit at home and memorize a bunch of facts. I want them to think through how they want to present this information or teach someone else, rather than just spout off the rules of being a good teacher. So I gave summative an F chord because that's the grade it deserves. This is the scariest for me, evaluations, getting to the end of the semester evaluations. But it helped reading Bain, knowing that it's just student evaluations and responses are just one part of what should be a big picture. And because I want people to like me, I want people to think I'm awesome. And so sometimes it feels critical that, you know, somebody didn't like me, or so I've instead tried to put more of that responsibility on the students as we go through the semester, and ask them to communicate with me if I am not the teacher that they need me to be at that time, so that we can work through that together and figure that out and get through that thought process. So doing student evaluations has taught me to spend more time making sure that I'm meeting the needs of all of my students and reminding them that they're adults and they need to communicate with me if they need something. Um, Portfolios don't always make us a great teacher. They make us look like a great teacher, but it's kind of like makeup. You can put a lot on and maybe not look like yourself, but you still have to be you eventually. Um, and I like this line, appropriate sources of data, because, just one person's opinion isn't the whole picture. And opinion is not fact. It's the lowest form of knowledge. So having somebody come in and be able to look at all of the data is really helpful and should give us a good picture or better picture of what's happening. And then we need to look at our objectives and see if they really do match our assessments, because assessment is really the heart of what we want people to learn. And if we want to get to the end of the semester and have them be able to, write or make a lovely lesson plan and execute that lesson plan and have prevention in place and be able to articulate the goals of the lesson and be able to do those informal assessments at the end of the lesson in seamless ways, then we need to be practicing that and looking at our objectives and making sure that everything that we're teaching throughout that course gets them to that end. So making sure that our objectives really do match what we want our students to learn. And then maybe asking them. I know we've talked about this a couple of times, that our students are really concerned about classroom management. And so I'm starting to add in a discipline issue of the day in all of my lectures. And so I'll throw up in a random moment. And today's was, what do you do if a student says, I don't want to do that? And so I allowed the students to talk through it and think through it, and we came up with what they felt was the best plan. And thankfully, that is kind of what the book says, and it's common sense, and it's really, it was really good to watch them go through that process. So I'm hoping that that will help them with how to think about to deal with those things, rather than be scared of students who might throw a wrench in their plans. They'll know how to deal with it. So getting them to think through that is growth, whereas they were scared at the beginning of the semester. It seems now that they're able to start thinking through how they should respond and what would be the best for the student, not necessarily for them, but what would get the student from point A to point B and inspire them to participate in class. So I hope all of this makes sense. I feel like I was in a hurry, but that's okay. I will see you all in class tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Get some vitamin D, sit in the sun for a minute or two, and I'll see you later. Have a great day.